Shiva is the form as well as the formless. The formless nature of Shiva literally means the auspicious nature of consciousness. It's benevolent. You only know something is benevolent from its opposite, malevolent. The malevolent energy is Rudra. Rudra literally means roaring, the roar, or the howler. That comes out when your life changes in an instant, be it health, be it relationship, financial, be it the world. The whole world has been going through a Rudra time last 1 year. That's the energy of Rudra. The famous chant Rudram from the Vedas talks about appeasing Rudra, so he lays down his weapons. But it's really the tension between the opposites, holding them. That's the Jungian approach. When you hold the tension long enough, a third solution emerges where you transcend the opposites. You are okay with Shiva and Rudra. And that is when you abide in your heart, in the present moment. You are able to go beyond the opposites of even the form and the formless. The Rudram chant also has this mantra, Nama Shivaya. There is no Om in that mantra originally. And it has 5 syllables, Nama Shivaya. Shiva is the Lord of the 5 elements. It also means the 5 layers or sheets or koshas. So when you chant the mantra Om Namah Shivaya, the space between successive chants is the oneness, the Om, the Self. Namah Shivaya. Namah Shivaya. Namah Shivaya. Namah Shivaya. Namah Shivaya. Let the thoughts come. This mantra acts like a windshield wiper, wiping the thoughts. Namah Shivaya. Namah Shivaya. Namah Shivaya. This occasion of Mahashivratri is the darkest night of the year, couple days ago, when the moon is the tiniest of slivers. Metaphorically, the moon represents our ego. In this time, if we surrender to Shiva, the ego subsumes to the self. Namah Shivaya. Namah Shivaya. It's also the time for tapas, doing spiritual work, setting an intention, sankalpa. If your intention is past the ego to serve, it's very powerful. Namah Shivaya. Namah Shivaya. Gently open your eyes to the Shiva statue right in front of you. I will go over the details later, but suffices to say, this statue is everything about our lives. The great physicist Fritjof Capra in the Tao of Physics talked about this Murti. When CERN lab in Switzerland has this 6-foot statue. Despite the chaos, the center of the statue is Shiva's heart. And that's the universal heart of oneness, of consciousness. Om Namah Shivaya. Kurt, please take it away.
Om Namah Shivaya. So, Jonathan, I got kicked out of the meeting right before Manoj started. Technology. Can you make me a co-host again, please? Thank you. And I will share my screen, and I will share this little presentation. Okay, so hopefully everyone can see that. In the book that is giving us the ideas behind this series, the quote for today on this new moon, and as Manoj mentioned in his meditation, you know, Mahashivaratri is when that last little sliver is there, and then today is the actual, or maybe it was yesterday or today was the actual full moon. I mean, new moon, sorry. But there was a quote in the book about today by Shankaracharya. It's right there at the top. Moved by compassion, thou dost create, sustain, and destroy this world. And that is not always the way in which we typically are told. We have Brahma, who's the creator, and Vishnu is the preserver or the sustainer, and Shiva is the destroyer. But with Manoj and I, we're actually going to explore Shiva in his all-encompassing cosmic universalness and see how he can be considered as all of those things. But as I mentioned before, we're going to look back a little bit, and that is to go over this idea of avatar or incarnation. And in a theosophical context, avatars and incarnations may be considered different, but from some of the Vedic scriptural stuff that I've been able to look into, they're kind of used interchangeably many times. And so we're not going to look at specifically avatar in the sense of, you know, Jesus or Buddha or these kind of reincarnating, cyclic reincarnating higher ego selves. We're going to look at this as Shiva even has aspects of himself that he recreates and incarnates from time to time. And this specifically on the screen right here was something that Jonathan had brought up and Manoj had brings up quite a bit, which is the idea of how Hanuman looks at himself and when he chooses to look at himself, what that means. So Manoj, if you could if you can see the screen here, kind of go through and talk about Hanuman a little bit and what this saying, not exactly these words, this was something that Vivekananda had specifically put together. Your words will be a little bit different, but what this means.
Yeah, thank you. I'm so happy you bring this up, Kurt. This is a very powerful saying because Hanuman is Shiva's avatar to serve humanity. So the Hanuman archetype is still active within us. But he started off with very humble roots, like a monkey. It's actually a humanoid, not exactly a monkey. It's a separate race. And he came in to help Ram, who is an avatar of Vishnu, God. And Ram was amazed at his exploits. So Hanuman literally becomes a superstar of the Ramayana, but he doesn't want any credit. And one of the key aspects in the path is losing that sense of doership. It's called a kartutva, that I am doing this. It's God serving through you. So when Ram was amazed, he asked Hanuman, "Who are you?" You know, and then Hanuman explains in one. Hanuman is so intelligent; he can explain in a couple of sentences the whole thing, the whole Vedas. So he says, "Deha bhavena dasosmi," which means when I take the viewpoint of my deha, my body, I am your servant. So that's classical duality. There's you, there's a separate God. Um, then he says, Jiva Bhavena Twadam Shakaham, which means when I take the viewpoint of a transmigrating soul, I'm a part of you. That's what is called qualified non duality, Vishishta Dvaita, where you keep reincarnating and then you merge with God. And finally, he says, Atma Bhavena Tvam Evaham, which means when I take the viewpoint of Atma, consciousness, I'm nothing but you. So in our path, when we forget, and there's been many occasions this year, and what Michael brought up just now, when you go through pain, you forget your true nature, you're dealing with the body issues. It's okay to be a devotee, to live in duality, but the final remembrance is who we really are. So Ram was so amazed in that PowerPoint slide that he literally embraced Hanuman. This is the essence of all the Vedas. Hanuman is a unifier. There's no division. There's no reason to debate amongst ourselves. Everything is the same. It's all one. Jai Hanuman.
Jai Hanuman. And what's interesting is later on, as we're getting towards the end, I was looking into the Shiva Sutras, and in many of those Shiva Sutras, it's actually stating the exact same things that Hanuman said to Ram. And so we'll get kind of a different take on it from those sutras, but it's a very similar way of expressing it. And I tried to kind of tie them all together again, because I'm a geek about looking forward and looking back. But I'm going to try to go ahead and tie that together. So let me go ahead and share my screen again, and we'll move on to, I have to kind of go back and forth between seeing you and seeing the screen here. We'll move on to Nataraj, which you had just mentioned in your meditation, that this kind of encompasses everything about Shiva. And so it's a very complicated topic, and I'm going to give you a little bit more time to talk about this one than maybe some of the other ones. And the quotes that I got here, again, I think I got from one of the texts that I have here. So again, these words are not specifically mine. They're going to be translations. One of the things that I kind of want to point out while we're here is that this very first thing on there, it says, he is called Hara, the destroyer who smashed the three cities. And in theosophy, we talk a lot about esotericism as far as these like secret kind of hidden meanings behind things. And then there's also this notion of the more materialized exoteric things that we find around us. And so when we're talking about destroying these three cities, true, cities are destroyed, but I'd also like to have us start to consider, as Manoj is talking, when we think about the stories we hear about Shiva, we need to really kind of reflect on these as kind of, in a sense, coded messages, right? So the destroyer of these three cities can be looked at as the destroyer of the three gunas, right? Because Shiva transcends those three gunas. And so if we consider the gunas as three cities, as sattvic and rajasic and tamasic cities, then Shiva would destroy those, because he is that which runs through all of those. He is that fourth, that Turiya state. And so these kinds of quotes that you see on here, while they may have a certain essence, like towards the bottom it says, he is the jewel in the ocean of consciousness, we can look at that as, well, what is it to be a physical ocean? But also then, what is that to be a drop in an ocean, and an ocean in a drop? And again, I'll touch on that again later on. So Manoj, if you can kind of talk about Nataraj next to you, and I'll get this screen off and we'll get back to you talking.
So I love that Kurt about the destroyer, and it's really the third eye of Shiva. When he opens his eye, he destroys, but it's the eye of self knowledge. It's like it's a different sense used to realize the self. It's like you mix salt and water. It doesn't seem like there's salt in the water visually, but you have to taste it to know. Similarly, the eyes, when he opens his eyes, he destroys the three gunas, as you put it, but also the three states of consciousness: waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. We are totally identified with these three. And look, it's a very hard concept trying to understand that the world is an illusion. And these three states are part of an illusion, especially when you're suffering. But unless you come to that point, that true understanding and living that, you will be stuck in what is called samsara, the cycle of pain and pleasure. It's a yo-yo. And the way to understand this, how does one live in samsara after awakening? Because in India, there's a concept called time pass. You know, what do you do after moksha? When you're awakened, when you understand the truth that you are the self, you do what is called time pass. That's why in India, the sages, the swamis are just able to sit around and just be. It's like passing the time. They don't need to get constantly stimulated. So when you look at this murti, this is a symbol of living in joy. And it's also a symbol of going through this pain and pleasure while remaining at peace. So the circle of flames is the world we create. So in Sanskrit, the name for world is Jagat, but it's the world each of us experiences. It's the world through the five senses. And through this medium, the Zoom. So I'm in your world and you're in my world because we experience each other. So the flame he holds in the left hand is the intention we want. Like, it's what makes us get out of bed, right? In Japanese, there's a term called ikigawa, which is the purpose we all need to get out of bed every morning. If you don't have that, it can lead to a lot of issues, psychological and body issues. So the flame is almost like a fire in the belly you need. It's like when you wake up in the morning, excuse me, there's a massive cortisol explosion in your body. So Shiva Sankalpa acts up. Okay, that's the flame. Excuse me. This is the drum, the damaru, which is Shiva's drum, which is everything is fluctuating. Even this pedestal is fluctuating. And that's his hair, the jada, the dreads. So if life gets to, for some reason, and I'm not choking up like I did in my last video, for some reason my voice kind of is cracking. Excuse me. So when things get too comfortable, like you're in a tub of hot water, what do? You slosh things around, right? Or it's like, for some of us, life can be stagnated. Instead of being a fresh flowing river, we can stagnate into a cesspool, a stagnant, smelly cesspool. We don't want that. It has to be fresh. It's called adbhuta in Sanskrit, the sense of wonder. Okay, so that's the hair. Now, what happens, and this can happen every day, we can have occasions when we are not okay. Stuff happens. It can be the internal feelings, it can be something out from outside. All that stuff that can hold us down is shown by this being. It's called apasmara, the being of forgetfulness. In epilepsy, Ayurveda is called apasmara. So what does Shiva do? He, and remember, Shiva is no different than us. It's an energy, it's the archetype. He pushes down on it, okay? But then we can only do that so many times. When negative things keep happening to us in psychology, there's a phenomenon called learned helplessness. Okay, you keep getting whacked, you can start to feel helpless. And that's where the spiritual work comes in, the tapas, especially at this time of Mahashivratri. And the spiritual work is where he points to his feet, right here. This is called Sharanagati Mudra, which means surrender, let it go, hands gesturing to his feet. And that's letting go of your ego to something far greater than yourself, your individual self. It is called Ishvara, right? Consciousness. And when you truly do that, with the other hand, he does this. This is the Abhaya Mudra, fearlessness. But notice the act of letting go, surrendering. It starts with when he crosses the heart, right? Imagine when you put your hand this way, you cloak your heart first. So the crossing of the heart, the cloaking, is the times in your life when you feel down. It can happen every day, but with the same gesture, he's pointing to his feet. He's giving you a way out. Okay. Now, regardless of the turmoil, the center is the heart. Okay. So the life is up. This is up. This is down. Pleasure, pain, pleasure, pain. But you know something that transcends that. And that is a heart. That is consciousness. And that happens when you live in the moment. You're able to transcend the duality of life. You're even able to transcend the form and the formlessness. But you got to put in the work. This is where, I love theosophy. There's so much books. There's a ton of books when you go to the Theosophy Lodge. Very cerebral. But what we're trying to do is bring in theosophy and yogic practice together, because Shiva is the Mahayogi. This statue of meditating Shiva that Kurt will show you was found 10,000 years ago in this ruins, Harappa and Mohenjo-daro. So it's an ancient yogi meditation. So this is where the work comes in. It's a reminder. When you do the work, you start to have a smile. Maybe it's an inner smile. Maybe it's an outer smile. Like Kurt and I, we travel all over the country before a year, right? And I always like to give this example. We take these statues when we teach workshops on the plane, many times to the East Coast, Colorado, and they don't allow so much, right? You're only allowed 50 pounds a box, but they don't measure your hand carry bag. So now I put like 70 pounds in my bag, and since Kurt is stronger, I put 80 pounds. And we're like schlepping onto the plane, and schlepping is a Sanskrit word, right? And Kurt's like talking, he loves to talk, and suddenly he stops talking. Why? Because he's like lifting and putting it overhead, and he's literally like, shaking. But where's the smile? There's a smile because he has to show it to the stewardess that, hey, it's not that heavy. And I'm doing the same thing. So that's the smile we can have regardless of the turmoil in our lives. It can be an inner or an outer. That's a central message of this piece. Regardless of the ups and downs in your life, you can come to a point where you become a witness. And humor is the greatest metacognition there is. It's not impersonal. There's a smile at this maya of life. When you're getting bent over, you smile. Stuff happens, you have a smile. Om Namah Shivaya. Take it away, Kurt.
And I just need to point out that there's no more real library at the lodge down there, just like there's no real library at your temple anymore. It's all now at my house. So the master bedroom in my house got turned into a library to house hundreds of books at this point. I mean, it's a fun place to go kick back in, but I now sleep in a different room because there's so many books here. All right, the next one, I can't believe I forgot this. He was supposed to right there, my Dakshinamurti. I wanted to kind of chat about this one specifically because this is something that has been calling to me quite a bit recently over the last kind of year or so. And again, these quotes don't come from me. These are from text, transliterated, texts. But it goes into Dakshinamurti being the teacher through silence, right? And I think that for me personally, that has been quite a calling of late, is to try to understand really what that means. And so hopefully, Manoj, you can help. I'm going to go grab my Murti and stick him back here so that he's in the picture in case you want to show or anything. But while I depart and go into the library where he's at right now, if you can start to kind of guide us through Dakshinamurti and through how Shiva comes to teach the rishis and the sages that are gathered around him in this picture, right? And how that is translated to them through silence. And I'll be right back.
So Dakshinamurti is a stotram written by Shankaracharya, and it's really the Shiva is the founder of non-dual wisdom, Advaita Vedanta. Even Tantric Shaivism, uh, Dakshinamurti is considered the founder of Tantric Shaivism as well as Advaita Vedanta. So the two great traditions, this is Shiva, where he's typically shown as a boy who is 16 years old, and he's sitting in the Himalayas. So that's the mountain he's sitting on, and he's sitting under a tree, and he faces south. Okay, because south is the direction of Lord Yama. Yama looks from the south upwards. So he looks directly at Yama in the face and says, "I'm not afraid of you." Yama is the god of death, because there is no death. I am consciousness. Okay, so furthermore, he said, this knowledge will not end with me. I'm going to give this wisdom to 4 enlightened sages. And the sages' names are Sanandana, Sanat Kumara, etc. And then, so here's a 16-year-old boy teaching ancient sages. Okay. And he's firmly, when you look at the Murti, his right leg is on Apasmara, the being, that's ignorance. And then this is, instead of the Abhaya Mudra, he's doing this self-knowledge, right? Where it's called the Jnana Mudra. When you look closely, Kurt, correct? And the forefinger is your sense of identity, the ego. We love to say it's your fault and I'm great. Take credit for what we do, yeah? And then the thumb is the self. We use the thumb for everything, lifting, writing, texting. That's why a dog cannot hold a coffee cup. It doesn't have a thumb. So when the ego bends to the self, forms a circle, and that is awakening. You're stepping beyond time. That's the present moment. And there is no beginning or end in the circle. There is no beginning or end in the present moment. There is no past or the future. Okay, all these are Maya. These are things our mind makes up. All the past and the future, none of them exist. When you truly live in the present, that's where it is silent. You know, Ramana Maharshi, he was very known for being absolutely silent and stay in this moment. So he essentially, this is the founder of non-dual wisdom. So I'm happy you got that Murti, Kurt.
Yeah, unfortunately, Manoj sold the last one when were we in Sedona or Colorado? Do you remember?
Yeah, we shipped it to Colorado after we came back.
Didn't you sell it to that person from the Shivananda ashram?
Yes, that was the Swami. He has Dakshinamurti in Sedona.
Yeah, the Swami. Yeah. And I had been eyeing it for a long time, and I kept saying, we kept lugging it around and schlepping it everywhere, and I kept saying, don't sell, don't sell, don't sell. I'm going to get this one day. And then we sold it to somebody else.
But you know me,
So I had to go find another one.
when it comes to murtis, there is no long-term strategy. It's like scalping, immediate.
All right. So I'm going to share another image here. So we're going to move on now to Ardhanaishvara, which is Shiva and Shakti. From a theosophical perspective, some of the words that we like to use, and you'll recognize them, but maybe some of the other people here might not, is this idea of Purusha and Prakriti, right? And so if you can also talk about when you start talking about Ardhana Ishvara, if you can talk about Purusha and Prakriti and how these two things, as this little third, I think, or actually the fourth one, the fourth little line on here says the two primeval aspects of the one unknown deity, how these two kind of merge into one. Let's go ahead and go on. And I actually have the Murti here, and I'll grab it once I stop sharing the screen so I can bring it up to the camera.
Yeah, thank you. That murti is
Warwick and I
absolutely
went to
wonderful.
the ashram today to grab it.
Thank you. I was supposed to get it. So when you look carefully, always the left side is Shakti, the feminine. That's why you have the breast showing. Because you slice a human body in half, the left is where the heart is, the changing. And that's why the left is the feminine. And she becomes Durga, and that's why you have the lion. And the right is Shiva, and he takes goddess Ganga in his hair. And when your right hand is cut, there's a crocodile right there. And Ganga's vehicle is the crocodile. But this is like TMI, too much information. I want to give you the essence of Ardha Narishwara. Ardha means half. Nari is woman, Ishwara is Shiva. So the idea is, you have the mythology and then you have the principle. So we all have Ardha Narishwara, the masculine and energy principle. The traits are different. When you look into the ocean model of psychology, we're not exactly the same, even gender wise. There are bell curves, there's a lot of overlapping bell curves, but there are slight differences. So I would say there's a masculine principle and feminine principle, and we can all embody that and perhaps grow more into that. So in the mythology, there was a sage called Bringi who just devoted his life to Shiva and ignored Parvati. And Parvati felt disrespected, and finally she ended up merging with Shiva. This is what Kurt talked about, merging. And Bringi couldn't like just circle Shiva. He had to circle Parvati and Shiva together. And long story short, he became a big devotee of Ardhanarishvara. So it's a hermaphrodite from the Greek tradition. It's just a very beautiful murti representing balance. So in the hero's journey, when the hero or the heroine comes back to the community, there's a complete balance. You know who you are, and it's a complete merging of the masculine and feminine. And one of the sayings from your slide, Kurt, is it comes from the unknown, right? That unknown is the Shiva Lingam and Yoni. So, in other words, consciousness is without form. Then it takes the symbol of the lingam and the yoni, and from that comes Ardhanarishwara, and from that comes all of us. So, this is a devolution. How does many come from the one? And interestingly, the journey is going back to the one from the many. So, that's Ardhanarishwara. And the bull of Shiva is important. It's called Nandi. And one of the attributes of Nandi is patience, especially on the spiritual path. I see people, being impatient. They want things done yesterday. And Nandi, if you go to Shiva temples, Nandi just waits outside. There's patience. And the four legs of Nandi represents the four yugas, right? The Kali Yuga, Satya Yuga, Dwapara Yuga, Treta Yuga. But very rich symbolism. And then the trident Shiva holds represents actually the Kundalini awakening. So the two different uh, trident parts of the trident is the Ida and Pingala Nadi, and the center is the Sushumna. So when you talk about the return of Shiva, we have the energy at this time of the year, the Shiva principle. But we also have the mythology. So in the mythology, when Shiva, after meditating for thousands of years, returns to meet his wife, Parvati, he finds this boy blocking the door, the entrance to a cave. And then they had a big fight because Shiva didn't recognize his son, and Parvati had created a boy. And then the boy's head gets chopped off, and the elephant head gets transplanted by Shiva because he realizes Parvati created him. And the boy becomes Ganesh for new beginnings. So Ganesh resides in our root chakra, metaphorically, the Muladhara. And he's the one who arouses the Kundalini. The Kundalini serpent energy undulates, and it's a three-pronged trident: the Ida Nadi, Pingala Nadi, and the Shushumna. And it's interesting you mentioned Janus, Kurt. It's a two-faced Roman deity, right? Yeah, I've been to the Janus temple in Rome, where you have entrance front and back, and very similar energy to Ganesh. Janus was new beginnings, just like Ganesha's new beginnings. Janus was lord of the anus, just like Ganesh is in the Muladhara next to the anus. And both are for threshold events in today's life. So the return of Shiva is very auspicious for many reasons, one of which is Ganesh, bringing back Ganesh archetype into our lives.
So the next one is meditating Shiva. And I went ahead, and this is, I took the liberty of using Sat, Chit, and Ananda to go ahead and describe Shiva in meditation. I don't know how accurate that is, but that was something that just kind of resonated with me, especially when you kind of look at some of these quotes that came from some of the Shiva Sutras. Again, these are transliterations of them. The one that really gets me the most is this one that says, knowing differentiatedly is bondage, and not knowing undifferentiatedly is bondage. To me, that's something powerful to meditate on and reflect on, which is, if you know from a perspective of differentiation, if you know from a perspective of I am this and you are that, right, that is a state of bondage. And if you are ignorant in that state of I am this and you are that, and I am this and God is that, both of those forms are bondage. So while I unshare my screen, would you talk about, and I'll grab the Shiva here, can you talk about meditating Shiva?
Absolutely. And I just love what you shared, Kurt, about undifferentiating, not knowingness. And the Rig Veda actually mentioned that I am beyond the known and the unknown. So it's like, I remember Rumsfeld's four quadrants, right? The known knowns, the known unknowns, the unknown knowns, and the unknown unknowns. One has to transcend all this. And that's the meditating Shiva. And if you look carefully, there are only two archetypes who meditate with the eyes half open, half closed. Can you bring that a little forward, Kurt? The Murti? Just when you placed him back. Look at the eyes. It's half open, half closed. Okay. This is that liminal state. Thank you, Kurt, where it's called Shambhavi Mudra. And only Shiva and Hanuman does that. That's the Hanuman. And same thing, the Shambhavi. And he's got about the same hair as Kurt. Yeah. Um, so the the idea is this is not Patanjali yoga samadhi meditation where there is no thought. This is more Vedantic meditation where your mind is slowed down in the flow state. The metaphor is like a moon in a cloudy sky. And the flow state from the brain point of view is your brain has slowed down between alpha and theta, between 4 and 8 hertz. And in that state, you are literally in that slow brain wave, which you are very prescient, Kurt. You called it Satchitananda. And there's even a hormone called, it's not a hormone, a neurotransmitter called Anandamide to describe this flow state. You're so right on. So the feel good neurotransmitters, the dopamine, the serotonin, anandamide, norepinephrine, they bubble up. So this is the origin of the Satchitananda state where Shiva meditates, and we can be in that state not just while meditating, but just regular living our lives. That happens when you are more the witness. You become the moon in a cloudy sky. Everything is slowed down. So Shiva and Hanuman, through the energy of Hanuman, shows us how it can be done. But I also don't want to forget Rudra. Rudra, the roaring, the howler, I mentioned in the meditation, because our minds have a tendency to just look for the good. You know, Rudra is, see, it's very different from other religions. For instance, in Christian mythology, there's a god, there's a demon. But in this case, you know, it's not two. Rudra is also the part of Shiva, which is howling, malevolent. That's why you have the Rudraksha Mala. It's the howler within us when you're disconnected from the source. So imagine, you know, you're a child walking with your mom in a mall, you get separated, you're going to howl. Or you're going through a terrific turmoil in your life, there's an inner Rudra, there's a howler. And one has to recognize that and have an ability to transcend both the opposites. That's the true message here. So that's the state of Satchitananda. We can all attain that. So this is the highest spiritual awakening we can have as human beings. Ultimately, we return to Shiva because Shiva is nothing but us. So it's a matter of recognizing that. Om Namah Shivaya.
And that's a good segue into this last slide, which brings in the theosophical, one of the founders, which is my talk next week, which will be on William Quan Judge. And he has a famous theosophical book called The Ocean of Theosophy. And what I put here was an ocean and a drop and in an ocean. And in, I think it was the second slide on Nataraj, there was that notion of ocean again, that Shiva was the jewel in the ocean. And so these themes kind of naturally seems to flow right through. You can see on the bottom right-hand corner, or in that area, there's that coin of Janus, that looking forward and looking back. And it seems dualistic in one perspective because of those two faces going off. But in a sense, you recognize that those are two faces of one head, right? They are still coming from that one essence, even though they're looking forward and looking back. And so I wanted to kind of wrap up the discussion here, talking about these cosmic qualities of Shiva that we've talked about, this notion of unlimited compassion. I think we all have compassion, right? But Shiva has to have compassion because of what Shiva is. He is the creator, sustainer, and destroyer of both the material and the illusory worlds, right? All of these aspects, Shiva has to have compassion. He recognizes sages that don't have the knowledge that he has as a 16-year-old, right, as a teenager, and has to compassionately teach them without ego or arrogance or hubris, right? So there's a lot of compassion in Shiva that we can find within ourselves. There's a boundless courage. Well, we all can be courageous. Michael is falling down, tripping over his shit and breaking his hip. And so now he has to be courageous in figuring out how he's going to navigate this life, right? With pain and with the complications that go along with that. I've actually done that myself, where I had 2 surgeries on my Achilles and I had to take the bathroom doors off so that I could get the wheelchair in there and out effectively, because otherwise that was going to be a rough life. But we have to find the courage to continue to go on through the pain. And Shiva he has that. He has that in everything that he does. We can think of Shiva as the eternal pilgrim, right? This notion of pilgrimage, of constantly evolving, constantly going from life to life. We started off talking about his many incarnations, his many avatars of bringing forth himself in different ages to help kind of push humanity along and get them to understand some of these ideas that we've been talking about here, of letting go of these attachments to illusions, right? And he also is considered the initiator of initiates. So he's one of the, Ganesh, we always talk about as being like a gateway deity, right? But Shiva is also one of the most profound essences, archetypes, deities that most people can relate to. Because as we've just talked about, we have compassionate aspects of him. We have servant aspects of him. We have angry aspects of him. We have perfectly balanced aspects of him with the masculine and the feminine, right? And we have utterly silent aspects of him. And all of these can be different paths of which each one of us can travel down to go ahead and find out who we really are, which is not the personality and which is not the ego, right? Who we really are is this kind of unknowable, from an intellectual perspective, self. And that's what Jyoti is always trying to help us to really understand when she gives her satsangs, is to really try to make effort, right? Make personal effort to grasp this notion of self and really identify with that. I think I have it back here. Maybe I don't. Here it is. To really grasp this notion of, is that backwards? I am that, right? And so as we move on into next week, right, I will be talking about Judge and looking at these things and kind of asking what kinds of qualities did he have? But I think really it's important for all of us to look at where are these qualities within me, right? And how can I make my compassion unlimited? How can I make my courage boundless? How can I make my journey, my pilgrimage, my seeking of truth, my seeking of self, how can I make that eternal as far as no beginning and no end, right? And how can I, in a sense, seek out so much knowledge, so much experience, so much self that I initiate either myself or I seek to find someone that can help guide me on my journey. So that's kind of where I think we'll conclude today, except I do have this one little closing out meditation of listening to Krishna Das for 3 minutes to kind of bring us out. And then after that,
one thing on compassion, Kurt, and I love what Krishna shared. I am that is Tattvamasi, the Nisargadatta Maharaj. But Shiva's compassion, like the churning of the ocean of milk, the gods and the demons were fighting, and then the poison comes. And Shiva drinks the poison for compassion to humanity. So something like this that happened to Michael, your life changes in an instant. But remember, Shiva is always there. When you tap into him, that's the energy of compassion where he really helps you. One of the names of Shiva is Bholenath. He's a very innocent being who comes into our lives and helps us. Thank you, Kurt.
All right, so let me play this last little thing. You can either close your eyes for 3 minutes or you can watch the screen.
Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Shivaya Namah. Shivaya Shambho Shankara Shivaya. Gija Shankara Shivaya. Shambho Shankara Shivaya. Gija Shankara
And that's the end of Manoj and I's talking. Here is the website that I've slowly started to finally give Manoj, which is after years of him saying, I don't have a website. We're getting much closer. I think some of these links actually work. So anyway, I thought I would go ahead and throw that up there because now he's going to have to change his shtick, right? He's not going to be able to say, I don't have a website anymore. There's actually something there to go to with at least a phone number and an email address, you know? And that's it. So were there any questions as I figure out how to stop sharing my screen? There we go. You'll have to unmute yourselves if there are questions. I'm seeing stuff in the chat, but I haven't clicked on it yet.
That was a wonderful presentation. Thank you so much. And I really appreciate the ending.
And I just wanted to say, while people are thinking of their questions, just how grateful that I am and that we are for these two, and putting on this beautiful dialogue and conversation and question and answer and so forth. and just so lovely and beautiful how they play off of each other, and for taking us into this inner journey of really transformation and transportation. Is really transporting, really taking us beyond the opposites, to this beautiful, beautiful realm of unity, and helping us really provide insights. And it's not easy, is it, to talk about something so mysterious, but you guys just do it so well. I really appreciate it. Okay, well, thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.